Bam! What's going on, folks? MC is in the house. All right, my name is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, and welcome to the Warrior Stream. I do this every week at noon Eastern Standard Time, and I'm usually on for about an hour. We'll see where this conversation takes us. Some things to go over. Wanted to answer a couple of questions. And trying to bring up these questions now. Give you guys a moment to get on. Mm-hmm. Corey, what's going on, my man? All right, do me a favor. If you guys are watching on Facebook, just do me a favor. Give me a like. Give me a comment. Boom, Judo Steve. There you go. What's up? Well, I just want to make sure that I'm broadcasting. So, Niels, what's going on? Is it Niels? Niles? Niles sounds more familiar. Jamie up in Canada. What's going on, brother man? Good to see you. All right. So I always want to give preference to those people that are watching the stream and any questions you guys might have. So let me know what's going on. All right. All right. Corey says, MC, your boy Sam won his fight. Congratulations. I heard you. Sam Hyde. Yeah. Yeah, Sam Hyde. I saw him beat the shit out of some other guy. I don't know who the other guy was, but he has a way of getting himself into these scenarios where there are these whole worlds of people who are doing stuff that I am completely disconnected from. But yeah, I was super happy to see that he won his boxing match. He's a fucking animal too. Like, holy shit, my man's been lifting some weights. He's looking good. Steve says from the Bronx, just moved to Oklahoma a few years ago. Good on you, man. I've been in Oklahoma a couple times, and man, I love Oklahoma. I love Oklahoma. Good for you. All right. So, a couple things that I wanted to cover, and let's start off with this this idea. And I wrote something here, and it's I always prefer going from the hip. Well, I guess that's not true, considering I'm about to read something. But I wrote this down the other day in reference to a question I had gotten, and I wanted to bring that up and discuss this a little bit. So the idea is about what we this sort of universalism, this connection, this humanism, I think is a more descriptive term, that some people sell as what should be driving our actions. Almost like, since you are somebody who has something, you are beholden to those other people around you who have created the world that you live in, I guess we could say, right? And it's just not the case. So we owe, and I'm gonna read this quick thing that I wrote. We owe other tribes nothing. That we need them to acquire what only synergy can provide is the mechanism by which alliance is incentivized. Dying tribes should be studied, not mourned. Okay, so first off, this idea that we're supposed to be getting along with everybody and taking care of the world, and let's make sure that there's no starving children. Let's make sure that everybody has shelter. Let's make sure. Well, there is this arrogance embedded in that if we were to do that, it would be better, right? That what it would take to do that, it would be better. And there's something to be said for respecting the cycles of reality, the cycles of life, the seasons in the very weather, being, obviously the driver of the analogy. We understand that there are tough winters. We understand that there are, abundant springs and summers. And we have sort of built a relationship with this as a society where we understand, winter's coming, and there are things we should do. And if we don't do them, we will pay a price. And with the surplus of the aquarium, the surplus of modern society, we have gotten away from respecting that cyclical nature of what life has to offer. And I think when it comes to dealing with tribes, embedded in what I wrote is the idea that we certainly need those other tribes. We need them to provide this synergy that alliance would generate, right? So we have what we have. We know that we cannot exist alone, because sometimes in order to continue to grow, we need access to resources that are found outside the walls of tribe. Well, that is what drives us to get along with other people. That's what drives us to design and maintain the formulas that allows us to build and maintain these alliances. It is not some sort of empathy. It's not some sort of emotional pull or expectation that we should take care of them because we wouldn't want to be in their situation. If we were in their situation, we would want somebody to take care of us. Well, the thing that we sort of disconnect from, which is kind of telling when we start to think like that, is that there is a finite amount of resources. There is a finite amount of everything that we have, up to and including, probably most importantly, our time, right? So the more people work internally to make themselves not only capable, but by being capable, also making themselves good investments for other future allies, the more sustainable a system it's going to be. And I would argue that that is the nature of reality in terms of the cycles that I was referring to earlier. So if you're somebody who is I'm feeling bad for, the starving African children, I want to go and help them. Well, you have to understand that just to even have that instinct it implies that you enjoy a certain level of surplus, so much so that you want to give that surplus to people outside of your tribe. Now, if you argue that, well, just if we're all human, they're all part of our tribe. We're all part of one big tribe. And I would say, okay, we're all one big tribe. And there are lower scales. And if you want to say we're all one, that's fine. But then I'll just always go to the scale below that, because that's the limitation of this idea of, all of us being connected. Sure, we're all connected. Okay. And the thing is, there's a difference between, and we know this, there's a difference between being exposed to a video, or let's go even further away or more disconnected than that. Let's say that you hear or read an article about starving children in Africa. And I use them as the example because it's, I'm nowhere near Africa, right? And everybody knows there's starving children in Africa. So I use that as sort of the universal, example when I'm illustrating these relationships. If I hear an article about starving children in Africa, I am going to, maybe take a moment or two to, contemplate, meditate, like, it's unfortunate, maybe make some sort of empathetic connection whereby I'm like, I hope they find food, or, I hope they square that away, or because I've been exposed to it to a certain level. And that is going to prompt, those empathetic, instincts that we all have, functional people, at least, that we all have, but it has to be prompted at a level that does not transcend the connection to what it is that is prompting it. So I cannot feel so bad about these starving kids upon reading about them in an article that I sell everything that I have and just go and give everything to them, because how is that going to be sustainable? And that's part of what so many of these people sort of ignore. It is, well, how does this actually work? And in lieu of a plan to actually make this work, you're actually just talking about a ritual that's designed for catharsis. You're doing this to feel better. You're not actually doing this to help people, right? So, but if I read that article, it would prompt a certain amount of reaction in me. It would be different if I saw a video. There would be a little bit of an escalation because it's not as ambiguous. Here, I now have an image that makes it a little bit realer, right? It's bringing it closer to reality to me, and I might have an escalation of a reaction. Now, I'm not saying that there is some system, if this then that. I would say that everybody that we have is connected to us, but only insofar that we could actually sustain that connection, right? So if we say that these people need from us and we should give them our resources because we have extra, again, it begs the question, well, where did the extra come from? And is the system sustainable? The system that created that surplus, is it sustainable if we take that surplus and give it to people outside or disconnected from our tribe? Now, it's not to say that we cannot aid these people, but I've always contended that the way we help these people the most is by being open to alliances that create synergy and also modeling a behavior that they could look to do themselves. Because beyond that, it is just a dream that one thinks that we're going to help people in a way that these cycles could be ignored. So when I talk about cycles, in reference to this now specifically, it's like, well, there are going to be times, I'm 47 years old and, I'm an entrepreneur. So I've a bunch of different revenue streams, a bunch of different businesses, and each one of them have their own cycles, embedded in their own, relationship with the markets that they're connected to, right? I have a martial arts school. I have a membership site. I have books that I sell. I have shirts that I sell. And, all these things are, peaks and valleys, very natural in the business world. Well, there are going to be times where all of these things synchronize to a point where they're all dipping around the same time. And as an entrepreneur, those are the winters, right? So for me, if I hadn't put in away for the winter, or if it's a longer winter than I prepared for, I have to make adjustments. There's no time where I tell myself that there is a third party, some sort of external identity that is responsible for fixing this, because I would have to assume that they're going through these same cycles as well. So a system where we are relying on people who have surplus to make up for our deficiency becomes untenable, because the systems that have created the surplus are going to be sabotaged, in the same movement of trying to have one pile help another, right? I hope that makes sense. Let me take some questions here. Cherrytown Vibe asks, are you saying that one's worth is tied directly to the resources they have? No, I would say, yes and no. Number one, it's one's worth to you, not one's worth in some sort of universal sense, which I would argue even the validity of at all. But I guarantee that somebody is, or let's take you, Cherrytown Vibe, you are worth more to yourself than you are worth to other people around you. And the further away you get from you in terms of your concentric circles of alliance or concentric circles of tribe, the less value these people are going to have for you. So much so that if somebody, I don't know where you're located, but if somebody on the other side of the planet were to be watching the news in their home and say, today, victim of a crash, I don't wish any harm on anybody, worth saying, but victim of a crash, Cherrytown Vibe, perished in this crash, they might not even remember about it, an hour later, because that's how disconnected they are. So would we say that, your value somehow diminished? Like, no, I think the context that we would need is your value to them, right? So again, to Cherrytown's question, are you saying that one's worth is tied directly to the resources they have? I would say one's worth to other individuals, yes, but that's not to say that it's equal, depending on the relationship that we're referring to, and it certainly pales in comparison to what one's worth should be to themselves, right? So I hope that answered their question. Utgard, what's up? Nerd Beef called me an ape. I'll take it. Okay. Corey, I'm going to drink some Monster before I read this. We in the West take on the responsibility of feeding villages in the third world that otherwise wouldn't exist without our aid. And now we're in a situation where we'll have to pull back because we won't, continuing, have enough for ourselves. Our arrogance would lead to their suffering. And this is something, absolutely right. And this is something you see recur over and over again, whereby, I think a great example of this I've used before is children, parents with children. I've created a meme years ago, and it was me and my youngest son. He, I think, was 3 at the time. He's now 10. And the text of the meme basically said, as parents, we have to acknowledge that every problem we solve for our children, we remove the opportunity they have to learn how to solve it themselves. Now, that's not to say we should never help our children, obviously. Like good luck to the newborn. Figure it out. You're hungry? Figure it out. The toddler, you want to not have a shitty diaper? Figure it out. There's obviously a line of dysfunction. And that's the game, right? That's where, where we're trying to determine our worth, is figuring out when we want to let them do for themselves, because we should all agree that independence is the mission, in that, that connection with a parent and a child. And we understand the more the child is taken away from those opportunities to learn to do for themselves, the more dependent they'll remain on parents, right? And some parents do this, foolishly. Some of them do it, on purpose, because they want their children to basically give them worth, and they don't want their children to have their own lives and identities. So that being said, in the third world, there are certainly countries that are beholden to us. And I don't consider myself an expert on geopolitics or the history of politics of even the last 100 years. But I will say that the United States did a great job basically trying to get the whole world to take our side against the Soviets. And we're still enjoying a lot of those same relationships and expectations, and I would say that, it's untenable. And we're seeing that now, right? The boogeyman used to be the Soviet Union. The boogeyman's still trying to be sold as being Russia. Meanwhile, China is moving into all of our fucking bedrooms, and there's no such boogeyman status assigned to them, right? So I agree. What's up, James? Cherrytown Vibe is Magoo. It's me, Magoo. One of my students at the Jungle Gym. Good. I'm glad. Great question, though. Great question. I don't even know what the fuck Cherrytown Vibe means. All right. So Utkar says, hi, I just saw that the geriatric in chief threatened his people with F-15s. Any thoughts on that? Will the U.S. right-wingers fare as good as the Afghans against the U.S. military? Here's the thing, if there is a conflict at that type of scale, against the against the United States government, I think that it's helpful, maybe even productive, to contemplate on what that would look like. I'll give my take for sure, but I want to that it would be worse than anybody would imagine for all parties involved. And the thing about anybody that would stand against the U.S. government, if it came to that, and there was an actual division of significance, much of that division would exist within the confines of government, within the ranks of government. And I think it would go to hell in a handbasket quickly. And I, for one, and I'm somebody who, listen, you're watching the Warrior stream. I have Warrior shirts. I've written about tribes and warriors and martial arts and all that stuff. I am right now and am one to remind everybody that the last thing that the U.S. wants is some sort of internal civil conflict like that. And shit goes bad fast. And it's not to say that we're in control of all of these things, but I think that if I'm for one am going to maintain my willingness, in my positions, I need to have that sort of moral compass set in a way that is indicative of what I believe and what I stand for. So I think there are going to be people who will get angry and want to escalate conflict. And I just don't think that that's a productive way to be. But I do think that there's a certain point where it's like, we'll be forced where it's either this or that. I have made a shirt and I wear the shirt often that says liberty or death, right? Patrick Henry quote. And it's something that I believe in. Now, people could say, yeah, well, you say that now, but wait until, somebody is absolutely granted. I've never had to die for liberty. I've never had to kill for liberty. So everything that I say when it comes to liberty and death is going to be just me making oaths out loud to the people that are listening to me. And I would just, ask like, what the fuck am I supposed to say? But as I stand right now, and I'm a father of 4, children, varying in age from 7 to 15. I have a wife, I have a family, I have people that I care about. I do not want, some sort of conflict that's going to put them in harm's way. But concurrent with that sentiment is the position I have that I will never live in servitude. I will never live as a slave. I will die before I am made a slave. And if there's a point where, I would have to escalate, my participation in a pushback against, tyranny, then I would say that, being a part of that would just be congruent with everything I've ever shared as what I stand for, as a man. So all that being said, it's like, the people in power now, they're so disconnected, and so many of the people, and it's the nature of the aquarium, especially amplified significantly by social media and the prevalence of social media. Like, there are a lot of people who are not only super, super disconnected from what the average experience of a citizen is like, but they have a disproportionate amount of influence because of social media. And it's only going to get worse. And I think we're seeing that right now. You literally have, I saw the other day, an excerpt from the sitting president of the United States' daughter's diary, saying that she thought it inappropriate that she had taken showers with her father. And there is nobody in mainstream media, save a few, typically conservative, individual journalists. There is nobody that is looking to investigate that or bring that into light. And it has been exposed a couple of days ago that, the Hunter Biden laptop was absolutely suppressed on social media. Mark Zuckerberg said it himself. And he blamed the FBI. Like, these are things that it's like, okay, at a certain point, it's like, you don't want civil war, but this is how you get civil war. This might be step 3 and 4 to 100, and 100 is when, we have a problem, but we are definitely walking down that path, because there's a certain point where more and more people are going to say enough. And in the beginning, when they're activated in that way, it's going to be just maybe a political, transformation. Maybe they'll become a little bit more outspoken, a little bit more participatory in the national conversation. But as some people on one end of the spectrum will flip sides or start being a little bit more vocal, there are going to be other people that had already passed that line a long time ago, and they're going to be at a different level of escalation. And eventually there's going to be groups of people that are now reaching or surpassing that line where they want to do something about it. And it's like, this is how you get that, this is how you get that. And there are some people that I know that are saying, listen, this is the only way it's going to get fixed. And I do not have the insight nor information to say that they're wrong. I don't want them to be right. But like I've said before, I train every day for a reason. What's up, Big Joe? Stella, they're just trying to pick a fight, and you know what? And I think that there's something to that. Um, right now, you have people who are still, and it always seems to get back to this. I guess it's current events, so I shouldn't try and fight it. But you still have people who are out there wearing masks. Still have people who are out there touting the necessity for everybody to be vaccinated. Um, you know, obviously, there are, I don't even have 100 people watching this right now. And who knows how many people will wind up watching it in totality. But the people that have been following me, I'm not unique in this, but I'm certainly somebody who I would argue has gotten it right from the beginning, who said that we were exaggerating our response to this, said that we were being manipulated, said that liberty is more important than safety, said that this is how you arm, tyrants with permissions and agencies that they're never going to look to give back. All of these things has happened. Everything that I said was going to happen has happened. And yet we're still here with people who are wearing masks and who are talking about, you have to get vaccinated. And I mean, do I have to go into the lack of logic? Like, is it even worth it at this point? Because there are people who are still talking about that, and they know that it's bullshit. They know, and it's now become just an identity, marker for them. I'm going to wear a mask because I'm one of those people that's part of the group of people that wears masks. Like, I'm a part of that group, as opposed to the actual utility of it. And, getting back to the original talk that I was talking about with owing people things, it's like, this is how you make yourself unallianceable. It's probably a better word in the English language for that. But it's like, if you don't want people to look at you as a potentially a good investment for an alliance, it's like, that's how you act. You act in a way where you just outwardly reject people, and you'll see this with individuals who wear, and I'm guilty of it also. They'll wear T-shirts that will basically, trigger the triggerable in whatever the shirt is referring to, but basically just putting out there, you're like, yeah, this is what I'm about, and you guys have seen me, I had the mask free shirts, and I was wearing them in public, in the middle of this. And there's just no way that I would ever, look to ignore that when talking about that. Like, I'm not going to have somebody who, because one of the myths or the misconceptions of alliance is, if we're going to build an alliance, we just need to find one person's or one side's point or position, the other side's position, and then just meet in the middle. The alliance will reside in the middle. Like, no, that's not true. There needs to be function considered on both ends. And if it's somebody who is, let's say you have a fucking weird analogy coming, a bird wants to make an alliance with a deep sea fish. It's not that, okay, we'll agree to live on an island, and that's how it'll work. Like, well, fish is like, no, I got to stay in the water. The bird's like, well, I got to stay, mobile. I got to be in the air. And so that the idea of function needs to be considered when building alliances. And there are some people who you will not have a significant enough overlap to create an alliance. And there are some people who are doing that or holding to those positions at a point that will have, other order effects that create society, that create an issue for society itself, right? All right, Ukard. The farther from function, the quicker the correction comes. Looking at communism's history and now our current great reset and the wacky ideas like it. So the farther from function, the quicker the correction comes or collapse. I would say the further from function is, I would say that there's functional and dysfunctional. And I think one of the ways to define what function is it allows us to sort of sustain ourselves. It doesn't mean that it's set. Quite the opposite. It's something that's going to change over time with experience. We all, while we're building or maintaining our relationships, there's also a concurrent relationship we have with the environment and with the universe. So we're not the only sort of players in the game. So with function, there's sustainability that makes it functional. So if you look at an agency, right, and I'll use an analogy of a government agency. One of the reasons why these agencies are just about always a bad idea is because they're going to be created for a specific mission. But in order for that agency to become functional once they've been created, they have to maintain two missions. And one of the missions is the nature of why they were created in the first place. But the other mission is self-preservation, right? So in that sense, getting further from function is not really, I would say, the test. It's really getting further from mission. And there's a certain point where it's like, well, why am I even following the laws now? If following the laws and not following the laws is almost, like ambiguous, why even follow the law? If there are people, there's something called, I think, a Laffer's curve. And it's a concept that refers to the seemingly paradoxical nature of how groups pay income tax, and how you will have a total amount of income tax collected increase with an increase in income tax percentage, right? So the more that people are paying taxes, the more the government will have, right up until a certain point to where now they're actually collecting less. And that relationship, referred to as Laffer's curve, is people saying, why, well, fuck this, I'm not paying this. And you'll find people either, taking their business outside of whatever taxable, region is they're exposed to, or they'll just flat out lie and not pay taxes. So there's a point of diminishing returns. And similarly, I would say that there is an alliance that we all have that keeps us together functionally. I've always said before, the Constitution is the compromise. Like that is what, citizens of the United States and Utgard, I don't know where you're located specifically, but in the United States, we have the Constitution, and the Constitution allows us to coexist in a way that we've seen hundreds of years of history supporting, so I think that the mission is now living and operating and pursuing an individual or a lower scale mission while honoring the mission of following the Constitution, as example, if you're an American citizen. So the further away, the quicker the correction or the collapse. I think that the further away from the mission, which is honoring the Constitution, the closer we get to people saying, well, why am I doing anything I'm supposed to do? Why am I trying to honor any aspect of the alliance I have with the state? And this happens functionally, this happens dysfunctionally. It's hard to say, and this is something it's not necessarily a gimme that people relate to or even agree with, full disclosure. But if you see an individual go crazy, we'll say going crazy, and go on a shooting spree or something like that. Like we gotta at least accept the fact that individual thought he was right. That individual is operating under a compass, a moral compass that incentivizes or supports the idea of what he's doing. So we have to understand that is a dynamic when we're building alliances with people. If we're not going to sort of give them permission to be their own person, then we're very, very biased in our expectations, and very easy for them to take advantage of us, for them to control us, or for them to betray us, because we're not taking into consideration who they are to begin with. And we're making an alliance with some sort of facade we demand that they present to us, right? All right. Cherrytown Vibe says, there's little to no incentive to being a law-abiding citizen because of this fluid legal system. This shit is 1920s Russia, 1930s Germany, my favorite, 18th century France. So I would absolutely say, and Magoo, my boy Magoo, I'm from the Bronx. Magoo's from the Bronx, and we have an experience that a lot of people don't have and haven't been exposed to. And there is a certain point where in functional daily life, the law is just a set of consequences that we sort of maintain a functional relationship with. And it's not like, hey, if you can get away with robbing something, rob it. Like, no, there's still the point of it is our individual moral compass and who we are as an individual always transcends any expectation that any law would place on us, right? So a benign example of that is jaywalking. Like, how many people actually go to the crosswalk, wait for the green light, and like, if you don't have to, right? No, you walk across the fucking street. And if somebody, like, I don't even stop at red lights in the middle of the night. If there's nobody around, like, what the fuck am I live in the mountains. There's times where I'm on a road, I'm at a red light, there is nobody there. It's like, fuck this. There's no fucking way. And if there's a cop pulls me over, I'm going to say, there's nobody fucking here but you. Oh, well, I got to write you a ticket. Okay, do what you got to do. Like, I get it, but I'm just going to make sure I look a little extra for cops, because there's a point where I am not going to determine my life based on the expectations and frameworks created by legislators who have absolutely no fucking idea who I am, what I'm about, nor do they care for the people that I've obligated and oath myself to protect and provide for, So it's just maintaining a consistency. So there's a certain point where, if the legal system, right, the law being the codified morality of a people, I've spoken about this before, law is the thing that is codified and created so that the deviants of a moral people are incentivized, sometimes through the risk or the threat of punishment, incentivized to become more functional, to basically act more normally, right? And when we have a society where that separation is made between the moral, the morality of a people and codifying, through laws, behaviors of the deviants. And it now becomes just a whoever, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, or the person with the most money behind the most politicians gets the laws, written or leaned in their favor. There's a disconnect. And it, again, this is a cycle. This is, go talk to people about the Kali Yuga. Like, this idea of a cycle in society, transcends, the fucking age of the United States, or certainly my fucking lifetime, right? So this is old wisdom, this idea of a cycle. But this is what happens. This is what happens. We're at a point now where, we had a republic, or the famous quote attributed to, I think, Ben Franklin is, what do we have, sir? A republic, if we can keep it. And it's like, yeah, we kept it for a long while, and let's see what happens now. But to date, still the best system we've ever had in the history of society. As we look to navigate this winter that is coming, we'll see what comes out on the other end of it. But this is the cycle, right? This is the cycle. So I think the fact that Cherrytown Vibe, is even referencing, different times in history in different areas of the world is a testament to the cyclical nature of, all parties got to end, right? Niall says tribe before state, every single time. The idea that, okay, we have, my wife is from Brazil, so half of my family is in Brazil. Let's say the U.S. went to war with Brazil. I'm never going to shoot one of my family members. I'm never going to take an American citizen's side over my family member in Brazil. Now, if my family member in Brazil is not mutually connected or invested in that relationship, then I will adjust my investment accordingly. But it's like, listen, like, my family comes first more than any state. But I obviously understand the need for a state, and I understand the loyalties that are involved in that, but I'm somebody who's always looking to convince family members to become United States citizens. Good people. We need more good people that believe in freedom, that believe in doing the right thing, that believe in, working hard, that believe in being good allies. Like, this is what America was built on, right? So what else? Utgard, Sweden, socialist heaven. Oh man, I haven't spoken to my boy Marcus in a while, the golden one, who's also from there. He and I have had some good conversations, and finding out what's happening in Sweden, and also Henrik from Red Ice. Uh, Sweden is one of these areas. Let me finish reading the comment before I start going on. Yeah, baby, now no longer neutral, picking a fight with Putin, preparing to crack down on extremists under the guise of going after organized crime, aka it's looking bad. And that's, they'll create the narrative. And remember, I talked about that sort of tipping point where there is now a significant number of people who have elevated their contempt or their opposition to the people in power to now where they're now being activated to action, right? So what the propaganda does is it minimizes that part of society that is prone or ready to be activated into some sort of action. It mitigates that. It lowers the trajectory, the momentum towards that. And that's what propaganda does. So there's always going to be a story, because here's the thing. There comes a point where it's like, create a weird analogy. A guy, he's super anti-violence, doesn't believe in using firearms, doesn't believe in doing anything violent, completely dysfunctional piece of shit. But, he's somebody that's like this, and there is his son on a playground, and there is a van. It pulls up, and the door opens to the van, and two guys get out, and they have masks, and they're running towards his son. And he discovers that there is a gun, a rifle, on the park bench next to him. That is a reality where it's like, okay, act or don't act. Like it's all the ambiguities taken out of the situation by design. Does this guy pick up the rifle and does he at least threaten the people? Does he start just mowing them down? Does he, say, I'm not going to grab that. I'm just going to go run to my son, and what? We'll get raped and sold into slavery together, like whatever the deal is. There's a certain, argument that could be had there, debate that could be had there. But now we say that there is a cop in the other direction, and if you ran to call him, there's a good chance he may have the ability to come in and intersect the people who are kidnapping the baby. Weak individuals will always look to maintain their position, and they won't accept the reality that's in front of them. There are people who will always try and get the cop, because then they don't have to go against what their deficiency are as individuals, or their positions on anti-violence, or whatever the case is. The aversion to conflict is what it usually comes down to. And these conflict-averse individuals in societies now, the propaganda, I would argue that a significant portion of them aren't even, convinced that it's true. They're not persuaded. They're not being duped. They just use that as fodder for the narrative that allows them to continue to avoid conflict. The more emotional pieces of society that they don't want to admit that conservatives are right. They don't want to admit that somebody that they disagree with politically can be right on anything. And the propaganda is just, again, giving them fodder to continue their position. I referred to earlier about the people who are still wearing masks and talking about you're supposed to get vaccinated right now. And it's not, I refuse to believe that all these people are just stupid. I said years ago into the beginning of this pandemic that what we're seeing is not just stupid people, and we're going to make a mistake if we just think it's stupid people, because stupid people are either not exposed to information or they're ignorant, right? They're ignoring the information, right? Ignorant. But it's not just that. Some of these people are just weak, and weakness rears its head a lot of different ways. When you're weak, you're somebody who condemns the climb. You're somebody who will not only not be relied upon when it comes time to do some stuff, but it's also somebody that concurrently condemns the people who are strong or the people who are looking to become stronger. That's what weakness is, as I defined it. So it was not only stupid, but weak also, that really put us in this jam. And more plugged in people than me are saying it right now. I have made mention of this in the past, but COVID happened. Next is climate. We're already seeing moves in that direction. And I think it's just going to be a matter of time before a lot of the COVID-esque sort of restrictions, start to surface again. But now under the guise of saving the planet, which is, again, that might be the tipping point for some. Corey writes, we're led to believe these reset events and collapses from history are accidental, when in reality they were manufactured in many cases. I would say they were probably all manufactured because in order to be manufactured, I think somebody consciously would have had to push the events forward. And I think, you'd be hard pressed to find any significant turmoil in the history of mankind where there wasn't some sort of cabal or individual that was pushing an ideology or trying to enact a mission to his or their own benefit. I think that's pretty standard. When you look at the what's his name, Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum, it's like the joke's been made, many times already. But like, could you design a better villain? Like, this is a movie. It's like, that's the villain. That's the guy that that's the guy that tries to take over the fucking building, and Bruce Willis has to stop him. Like, that's the guy. And when you hear them talk, it is so disconnected from where we think we are nowadays. But it's the same type of mindset that I could only imagine was embedded in every royal patriarch, kings, queens, anybody that's led any sort of monarchy, dictatorship, any sort of totalitarian regime, any sort of autocratic type relationship or government. Like, there are people who talk like this guy, that they know better. We know what's going to work for everybody. In one of the emails that I sent out the other day, by the way, if you're not on my email list, masterchim.com, make sure you're getting these every day. I had made reference to individuals who think that they are smarter than nature, right? They're smarter than nature. Let me find out exactly. Oh, this actually wasn't. This is an excerpt from a book, my next book. I'll share this with you. Nature is good to those systems born of a natural evolution. To reject a part is to reject the whole. History is riddled with those who've arrogantly attempted to build a better system. If the followers of Zen, for example, were to say, go with the flow, then the followers of socialism and this unnatural way of living would say, I can create something better than flow to follow, and you should follow me when I create it. So I think that the relationships that we have in where government's concerned, that respect the individual, that respect nature and our relationship with it, will always fare better than those that repress the individual, or those who are led by people who have a better idea. And when you look at people that are talking about the Great Reset, people like Schwab and whoever else is behind the curtain at the Davos events, like, these are people who think they figured it out. And some of them, they're along for the ride to make sure they can be a king of their own kingdom when this is all said and done. That's as universal a story as any. But there are others who actually are so arrogant as to think they have a better way than nature. As if, getting back to something I was mentioning earlier, we should eliminate all starvation. Oh, should we? Should we? Does that exist in a vacuum when you say that out loud? Or, because you put everybody in the matrix pods. Nobody's starving, right? Nobody's starving. Is that what you mean when you say that we should eliminate starvation? Because that's one way to do it. We should eliminate crime. Oh, really? Are you saying that in a vacuum, or are you saying that in the real world? Because in the real world, we just put everybody in a cage, put everybody in the matrix pods. No crime. Can't let them out. You got to keep them there. No crime. You feed them, no starvation. Like, these are the things that people don't consider when making these broad, proclamations of, we need to get rid of this. One of my criticisms of Jordan Peterson a couple of years ago, and I some of the stuff that's relevant, I still watch, and Jordan Peterson is amazing on some topics, but there is this aversion he seems to have to suffering, and again, it's hard to have gratitude for suffering, but I'd like somebody to show me the man who's worth anything that's not a product of that very suffering. And if everybody that we value and respect and hold on some sort of a pedestal, individually or as a society, like, who are they if not champions of overcoming suffering? So if, like, you remove the suffering, right? Let's use the framework that Peterson likes dealing with, the more Jungian, Campbell-esque framework of this dragon, and like, if we remove the dragons, don't we remove the heroes? Is it ill-conceived that we should endeavor to remove the dragons? Number one, because we are actively looking to build a system that condemns the heroes, that potentially removes the impetus for them being born or created or forged to begin with, all the while, ignoring the sheer arrogance and, I would say, ridiculousness of thinking we can get rid of the dragons in the first place. It's like when we talk about eliminating suffering in the world, like, obviously I'm a little bit, not to sound arrogant, cue arrogance. I'm a little bit further along in the relationship with what suffering, the value of suffering is, than most people. I've just invested some time. Most people haven't. But when you have somebody that says, we should look to eliminate suffering, one of the very common things that they ignore is that, well, you understand that suffering right now represents a value or a number, an amount, a weight of stress, right? But once you eliminate that, we lose the strength it took to engage it, which means suffering now is just wherever our current vulnerability happens to be. And as we look to remove the suffering at every level of vulnerability, we incentivize a reduction in our strength and an increase in vulnerability further still. So, it sucks going through some shit, right? Stress. And, I talk about what my business is. Like, I have 4 kids and a wife I need to provide for. When my businesses all are like hitting winters simultaneously, like, I have to, it's like those sci-fi movies where they're in a spaceship and it's like the guy gets into the cockpit because he's got to fight some bad guys, whereas most of the time it's on autopilot and I'm in the galley, drinking some fucking jelly, whatever the fuck they do. But like, there's every once in a while shit goes sideways and you got to jump in the cockpit, be ready to fight. As an entrepreneur, those things happen. But I also have to, at the same time, never ignore what my lifestyle gives me. The fact that my kids, are my kids are good people. My kids are strong mentally. My wife and I, we've been married almost 19 years. We've known each other, a month before we got married. Like, shit's working. Like, there's a certain point where I have to understand everything that I enjoy about my life came from this system. So who am I to say I could just change this one thing of the system and not think that I'm going to alter the benefits in their entirety? Now, it might be a progression. It might be something that I'm actually doing well. I'm making progress. If I design another business or improve the systems internally in one of my businesses, whereby the winters are fewer and further between. Like I get that, but when the stress shows up, I need to always maintain a connection to the big picture, the cycles, so I could even appreciate the fact that I'm going through it at the time. Easier said than done. It's something that a good portion of my life is dedicated to maintaining that outlook. Not only physically looking to change my state, but also having these rituals that have meditative disconnections from the things that stress me out, like shaking the Etch a Sketch, so I could face these stressful situations with the full capacity of who I am. Rather than just eroding over time and becoming dysfunctional like many people do, right? But you got to respect the cycles, right? All right. Corey says Red Eyes is where I first heard him years ago. Yeah, Henrik Alana, great people. I haven't touched base with them in some time. Maybe I'm gonna reach out, send them a text, see what's up. Hope they're well. I know they were growing their family. Ukar replied, "A weak people. The same could be said about the people who think that the same politicians that got us into this mess in Europe are going to take us out of it. Most people live in complete denial." Right. So I think that the concept, you've probably heard of it, pathological altruism. I think that a lot of the formulas that allowed us to thrive in more homogenous societies in the West, we carry a lot of those same formulas into a landscape and an ecosystem that is not the same. And we've lost our ability to process who is in tribe and who is ex tribe, right? My whole book, TRIBALNOMICS, is all written on the premise that people are fucking this up. And I think that is a very, very common, significant example of where we see that in society, that people will ride or die with a politician who has shown himself to be inept, right? So the thing is, I supported Donald Trump in 2016. I supported Donald Trump in 2020. Why? It had very little to do with how great Donald Trump was in a vacuum. It had very much to do with who Donald Trump was compared to the entire ecosystem in which he was running for presidency. So that is always taken into consideration. Right now, just a little U.S. politics. If Ron DeSantis decides to run, I will be voting for Ron DeSantis, and at that point, and a lot of people think like I do, if Donald Trump were to come out and attack DeSantis, a lot of people are going to crush Trump, who were supporting him in the last two elections. Am I somebody who thinks that the election was stolen in 2020? It's like, at this point, what's even the value at this conversational level of even addressing that? It's just at this point, it's just a divisive topic. Here we are, 2022. The economy's shit. Inflation's going through the roof. Immigration is fucking run amok. Illegal immigration is run amok. I don't even think it deserves a conversation. Like all the people that could have handled that more effectively, they ain't me, right? And right now I'm going to continue. We mentioned before, tribe first. Like I got people that I need to take care of, people that rely on me. So was the thing overturned? Like if Trump thought it was overturned, then he should have fucking did something about it. And at this point, I know Biden's bringing us to hell in a handbasket, which there's still people who, say, they sort of give themselves therapy by saying, at this point, as bad as it is, at least we didn't have Trump, like It's like, yeah, I don't, we don't have enough in common to deal with each other if you're somebody that thinks like that, right? So the people that follow politicians, it's because they don't have a system. They don't have a process by which they actually value. They assess the value of these alliances, and they usually just opt for what's familiar, or they're so vulnerable that they succumb to the story, the propagandized story and narrative that a lot of these politicians are experts at designing, right? All right. All right. Last comment here. Cherrytown Vibe. The cops didn't protect me when my apartment was broken into 2 years ago, and they didn't protect me when a woman I was dealing with threatened violence on me after I asked her to leave my home. Right. And again, it's when it comes to cops, I know a lot of cops. I know a lot of good cops. I know a lot of bad cops. And one of the things, I was just talking to a cop friend of mine literally last evening at the gym in PA here, and we were talking about the nature of his job. And he works in PA. He used to work in Jersey, and I told him that I remember being younger, and the relationship that we had with cops was one of sort of a mutual respect. And one of the things you observed in that world was a culture where they enjoyed being cops. It was a cop life, and that culture that supported them is no longer there, because now being a cop is just a city job, because these people either don't have a vested interest, they don't have skin in the game when it comes to doing right by these neighborhoods, or they're undertrained, or they were raised in a society that did not instill in them a commitment to the quality of life that Americans, grew accustomed to. So, i.e., they don't care, and you compound all of that with how cops are treated when they even do the right thing, if enough of the narrative gets built against them for doing so. How there are, departments around the country that will sell their officers out, if the political pressure becomes significant enough. And it's one of those things where damned if you do, damned if you don't. So yeah, relying on cops, that's that time is done. And one could argue that it was never there to begin with, but I would say wherever it was, the capacity or level that we could rely on cops in, let's just say New York City as an example, has been severely undermined and diminished. And it's like, yeah. So what does Plan B look like? It looks like a lot of violence in the streets, right? Where a few blocks from where my school is in the Bronx, a couple days ago, it was on national news. A bunch of young pieces of shit jumped out of a car and actually put a off-duty cop who was jogging in his neighborhood, put him in the hospital, robbed him. And it looked like a bunch of fucking jackals just jumping out of a car, just swarming and overwhelming them, beat the shit out of him, took his shit. This is a few blocks from my school, and it's like, that's not happening to me. That's not happening to me. And part of it's going to be because I'm not the guy they think they could stop the car, probably. But I'm not leaving my safety and the ability of me providing for my family up to the choices made by fucking animals, but notice that even the undercover cop was not helped by cops. And you could argue, well, what were they going to do? Right. Exactly. Situation where, what were the cops going to do? Exactly right. Which means there's situations that we need to be able to handle it ourselves. Right. So, all right, guys, I'll stop there. Ike Love. Just saw my man Ike. Ike, I went to high school with Ike. I'm gonna hit one more comment just because my man Ike's here. Ike writes, the fall of communism was a direct natural consequence of violating the laws of nature, i.e. individual human initiative. There we go, nail on the head, exactly right. And this is probably, referencing what I was talking about earlier. If we ignore what human nature is and the inclinations that individuals have, we will never have a system that is sustainable. We could argue that every system we have eventually has an end, right? The Dan Kennedy truism, they all go lame, right? Even my my alliance codes, one of the codes, respect the expiration date. Even if that's the case, if you're talking about are we moving society further ahead or are we reducing it, I will say whatever your impression of what that looks like, ignoring human nature as a component of that design, of whatever design you advocate for, is certainly a recipe for disaster. And if you're somebody who thinks suffering should be respected but minimized, then that is something that you need to make peace with. You know, people are going to be people. And the way to increase suffering is by making people weaker or by forcing them to enter into more conflict that ignores who they are and who they want to be, who they have you could say a right to be in a universal sense. All right. But I'll stop there. Appreciate you guys hanging out with me. I'll be here next week, same time, noon Eastern Standard Time, the Warrior Stream. Those of you that have not given me your email to get on my email list, it's free. Go to masterchim.com. There's a form there. Put your email in. I don't sell it, share it. I don't do any of that shit. Aside from that, all the other relevant links are in the description of wherever you're watching it. If you're watching on YouTube, one of my Facebook channels, all the relevant links of what I'm doing and what I'm about are there. But I appreciate you guys. And brothers and sisters, as usual, I will see you next week. And pressure to power.